Hey, it's Sam. So I'm making this video. As you can see, it's about Vedic astrology, Biden and Trump in 2024. What's ahead? Transits, dashas, and eclipses. As you can see, I have both of their charts here, and I have quite a few symbols around these charts. These are their two natal charts, but I also have their dashas. You see Biden dasha here, Saturn, Trump dasha, Jupiter, Ketu. I also have their ascendants here with a circle here in sort of purple. Then I have where the nodes are. This is the biggest thing. The nodal axis is this Rahu eclipse that's happening in April will happen in Biden's 5th house, in Trump's 8th house. Then Jupiter in the sky. It's actually over Biden's moon in Aries. Trump doesn't have any planet in Aries, but Jupiter's in his 9th house by transit, and Saturn is by transit through Trump's 7th house and through Biden's 4th house. So we're going to unpack these things, look at this. They're actually calling it the Great American Eclipse, and this is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Please like the video. Clicking like helps a lot more than you know. It pushes the video higher in relevant video searches. Also, please leave a nice comment. Comments also help more than you know as it raises the video in searches. Many times with hundreds of likes, there are only a dozen comments and they can be disproportionately negative. So be positive. Let me know if you like this. Even just a few words really help. So subscribe, ring the bell to get notified of upcoming videos. So yeah, a big year ahead for these two gentlemen, and of course they may be even running against each other in the presidential campaign. Of course, it's being drawn up that way at this point. I'm not 100% sure that that's the way it's going to actually play out, but I did do a eclipse video actually, and you can go to samselectionprediction.com. I did a full video on the 2024 election if it's these two, as if it was these two running. You can check that out. It was a great comprehensive case study. But this year ahead, what I want to focus on, especially the next several months, because really the year is broken up into two parts, mainly as they revolve around these eclipses. And as it says here, it says for Biden, the eclipse cycle shows confusion with children and creativity, as Rahu is in his 5th house being eclipsed. He has a Scorpio ascendant. He has Venus Sun in the 1st house. This is Biden's chart. These are good birth times, by the way. And so the eclipse that's coming as we're approaching this upcoming eclipse is in Biden's 5th house. Now, again, you can see the stress and confusion and disruption around, for example, his son Hunter Biden. Of course, you've seen a lot with that. But in general, the 5th house is auspicious, and it's connected to growth and to merit. And in fact, even just today or yesterday, depending on when you're seeing this video, one of the people who was supposedly behind Biden's impeachment, where they were going to try to impeach him for all this Ukraine stuff, just actually got indicted, I think it was, or was found to be, without any credibility at all. So the attempts to try to really go after Biden for illegality haven't really paid off. There was that other guy, Archer, I think, who was supposed to be the big witness against Hunter and showing how the Biden crime family and all, even on Fox, they've shot all this stuff down because there's really no merit to it. So again, as you can see this intensity and this potential danger, which is what eclipses represent, but they're really going through Biden's 5th house. Rahu was going through Biden's 6th house and over his moon last year. So there was maybe more fear and potential danger around it last year when the eclipses were happening in his 6th house. Now they're in his 5th house that's actually in a more auspicious house. And again, these eclipses are moving up until April. And usually the most intense focus of the eclipse cycle is the month of, the month before, the month of, and the month after. So from March until May or so, that's what's going to be the most intense. And so for Biden, it's still a lot of potential things there, particularly with his son, but it's a house. It's a house of growth, the fifth house, and so it's the house of our passion, our heart's desire, our joy. You might see him really start to grow, like with polling and stuff like that. Relative to his challenger, you see I have the boxing gloves hung up here. And particularly for Trump, boy, this doesn't look good because this eclipse happens in his 8th house. These eclipses are now happening in his 8th house. And you see, for example, next to Biden's nodes up here in 5th house, I have like a heart, which actually represents this heart's desire. With Trump, I have a skull because the 8th house represents, it's the house of death, but of danger and endings. This eclipse cycle shows danger and losses. The 8th house, heavy consequences are ahead for him. Now again, just yesterday, there is actually a court case now being settled, set up in the Manhattan case. This one has been kind of overlooked, but it's a heavy case. This goes back to the 2016 election when he paid hush money payments to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet before the election. And these are campaign violations. His former lawyer, Michael Cohen, went to jail for these charges. He's going to have to sit in a courtroom. These are criminal charges. Doesn't mean he's going to go to jail, but these are criminal charges that he's going to have to be in trial for. And it's kind of almost a slam dunk case. It's hard to believe that now they're going to impugn Michael Cohen on the stand, but they already found him guilty, and they have canceled checks of him doing it. It's not like that. It's hard to imagine. Now again, it's a jury trial. As much as someone might scream witch hunt and whatnot, all of these things that have happened have been grand juries that have been impaneled with citizens. These are trials of juries. It's not, for example, what's his name, Alvin Bragg, this prosecutor can bring the case in the New York court system, the DA, but it's going to be a trial of people sitting on a jury, right? So we have a legal system that has a jury. So if it's wrong, then they won't convict him. But he, deserves to be in court. But, he's lost these recent court cases with sexual allegations, not just allegations, but the convictions against the E. Jean Carroll, and then the ongoing harassment of her, having to pay these fines. He's about to get just really smashed with the Trump business fraud in New York. About $300 million fines are about to come. So this is really, again, you could see this eclipse coming in his 8th house even before, but that trial date for the Stormy Daniels case was set for the end of March. So this is right when we're getting on this eclipse in his 8th house. And they say that trial will maybe be 6 weeks, a month to 6 weeks. So by May, by the end of that eclipse cycle, he could very well be convicted of this crime. And again, this is not going to be good news because it's going to bring all of that up again of what actually happened in 2016 right before the election. Imagine that election if a month before or a couple weeks before, this was around the Hollywood tape of grabbing the woman by the if at the same time it would have been known that he had an affair with an adult film star. But it didn't come out because he paid hush money. There was another one too with McDougal. They were called Catch and Kill. Anyway, so you can see the danger ahead for him. This is 8th house stuff, and not only financial penalties, but could really decimate a lot of his chances. Anyway, so you can see the difference in these two with the upcoming eclipses and how much energy is focused there. But there are other things as well in 2024, especially if we look at these other shifts that are happening with Biden. Saturn is going through his 4th house. He's actually in Saturn Dasha, and he'll be in Saturn Dasha even through the election. Saturn for him, it's in his 7th house, and by transit right now, it's going through his 4th house. So you can see the emotional pressure that he's under. it's a pretty neutral transit for, Saturn is in Aquarius, the sign that he rules, but Saturn isn't really, it's actually aspecting his ascendant and his Venus sun. So you see the pressure that he's under. It's also, by the way, aspecting his moon. So actually, as I'm seeing this, Saturn is putting a lot of pressure on him, and you could see looks like he's getting older and older and older by the day. He's since his Saturn dasha, he's really become Saturn. So it's, you could see this transit in the sky really is showing. He's definitely showing his age. He looks really bad. So we can see this. But again, when I'm looking at, there's always potential danger, particularly when Saturn is aspecting the ascendant, also aspecting the moon. So it's a serious transit for both of these guys. This is why I even said when I did my 2024 prediction that I'm not sure both of them are that it's really going to be these two. Trump, for many reasons, particularly these trials as well. These are some serious, serious trials. There's also things before the Supreme Court, which shows the trial with Jack Smith trial, can happen. And then there's things going on with Georgia case, and there's a documents case. It's so much. But with him, it's obvious. But with Biden also, both of them are older than dirt. So who knows what could happen? There's also ideas that maybe later on, after Biden gets the nomination, when they go to the convention, they'll pick somebody else. Who knows? I'm not going to really get into that too much right now. But there could be some big shifts ahead when Jupiter moves later in the summer, later in the spring, which I'll talk about. But so Biden's Saturn going through the fourth house shows the emotional pressure, and it's also aspecting his ascendant and his moon. So we're seeing how he's just looking so old, right, and slowing down. With Trump, it's aspecting his ascendant also in the seventh house, and also aspecting his Mars, and it's also aspecting his debilitated moon Ketu, especially his debilitated moon. Not favorable for him either by any means. Saturn's really not a very favorable planet for either a Scorpio or a Leo. It's much less auspicious for Leo though, as it's the sixth house ruler. But so for the most part, it's kind of neutral for both of them. It's not really doing either of them any favors, and it might be doing Biden a little more harm. As being shown by how old and he just seems to get more stiff every day, might be doing him a little more harm in that context. And then Jupiter up here, again, it's been going through Biden's sixth house, but it's been going over his moon. He has the moon in the sixth house. It's wild to consider that Jupiter's been going through Trump's ninth house, where it can confer some luck in legal matters. And by the way, he has been having luck in legal matters where he hasn't been prosecuted for these things, and the courts have been giving him delays and all of these kinds of things. As much as it doesn't seem like he's had luck in these legal matters, he's had 4 indictments, and none of them have really moved forward the way many thought they would have by now. Jupiter is going to move into Taurus in May, and then it's not going to be in Trump's ninth house anymore and not aspecting his ascendant. Again, for all of the what seems like problems of Trump, Jupiter's actually been in a very auspicious place for him, which is going to change in May. So we could see Trump's luck get much worse in May when it leaves his ninth house, stops aspecting his ascendant, and goes into Taurus in his 10th house. Now, one might say that Jupiter going through his 10th house will be auspicious for his career or whatever. Maybe. I'm not so convinced, because his problems are legal problems as much as anything these days. And again, he does have Sun Rahu in the 10th house, but it's very far away from these degrees where Jupiter is going to be. Jupiter's going to be pretty far away for quite a while, but we'll see. I think it's going to be more auspicious for Biden, because in May, Jupiter moves into Biden's 7th house, goes over his Saturn, and Jupiter will then be aspecting Biden's ascendant. And so that is a better aspect, I would say. And Biden's Jupiter is actually much more powerful. It's in his ninth house and it's exalted, so he has a better Jupiter anyway. So just to read through the rest of what I wrote here, as I said, for Trump, Jupiter is in his ninth house with legal matters, or I should say luck with legal matters, but that's ending in May. And then Saturn in the seventh house shows relationship pressure. That's also a big thing with Trump having Saturn going through his seventh house. There's probably some big relationship pressures with his wife and whatnot these days. He's about to lose quite a lot of money. He's already, there's an $80 million verdict against him in the E. Jean Carroll case, and most of that was punitive to get him to stop harassing this woman. She won a defamation suit against him, and it was ordered for him to stop harassing her, and he kept doing it. So she took him back to court, and then they gouged him for $50 million punitive. Maybe $50 million will get him to stop harassing her, and it has. He hasn't done it since. But that was just a $50 million or $80 million mistake, because he can't stop bullying and abusing this woman. So he had to pay. Anyway, but so again, you wonder what this does in his marriage. God knows, I don't know, but we can do astrology. We don't have to see it in the public. Saturn going through anyone's seventh house isn't so good. Plus, look, these scandals and these, he's about to go on trial again for this hush money payment that he paid to Stormy Daniels. Okay, it seems so normal to us, but wonder what his wife is thinking about all of this. Imagine how embarrassed she must be to be married to this guy. His canceled checks of him paying back Michael Cohen, who paid off Stormy Daniels. And again, he's married and has a kid. So imagine, you see this Saturn in his seventh house, the relationship pressure he's going through, right? So again, that's the Saturn in the seventh. Again, then Jupiter goes into his 10th house over his Rahu sun. But again, they're very late degree. And as it says here, I'll just read through the rest of Biden's here. Jupiter moon shows luck, which continues after May. So again, the Jupiter moon going through Biden's 6th house has also shown some luck. When Jupiter goes over the moon, it does. But that really also continues as Jupiter goes into Biden's 7th house and over his Saturn. And then Saturn in the 4th shows the emotional pressure. So I already covered those things. But, for the most part, this is to give an overview of what's going on. And you can see here this eclipse that's happening in the USA. This is the April 8th eclipse. And if you remember recently, I've been doing and showing that the eclipse is a waxing and a waning effect. As the sun gets closer to the sign of Pisces, right now he just moved into Aquarius, so we're getting closer and closer to the April 8th eclipse. Again, we just had this ruling where we can see, for example, like with Trump's trial, now there's an actual trial date, and he's going to be sitting in a courtroom at the end of March. They're going to start selecting the jury. So during this eclipse time, he's going to be in a jury. He's going to be in a trial while that eclipse is happening. And again, with Biden, there's been some relief, especially of some of this, potential legal pressure, because there'll be people in this video that are like, what about Biden? When is he going to go to jail? When is he going to get impeached? Why don't you ever say anything about Biden and him getting impeached? I don't say it because I don't see it. That's why I don't say it. And we don't see it because there's no evidence for it. And every time I understand the sort of, the Republicans in Congress keep talking about impeaching him, but every time they put forth someone, the guy's name was Devin Archer, who was a colleague of Hunter Biden, the guy winds up saying, no, actually Biden never, he called Hunter Biden all the time because Hunter Biden was on drugs, but they never talked about business. Hunter Biden maybe bragged about the big guy, but Joe Biden never did anything. Now this other guy who was supposed to be this linchpin of getting Biden impeached for all his Ukraine, corruption and Biden crime family stuff, this guy himself just wound up being convicted, I think, of either a crime or something. I just saw it. I don't remember what it was exactly. But what I'm saying, the reason I'm saying this is because as the eclipse gets closer to like Biden's fifth house, again, he's getting, the things that's growing for him are fifth house matters. The things that's growing for Trump are eighth house matters. Again, this eclipse is building like to Biden's fifth house and Trump's eighth house, right? And so again, the fifth house is much more auspicious. Biden had more danger, I think, during when, as far as let's say legal or other kinds of stuff, when Rahu and Jupiter were going through his sixth house. Because again, Rahu was going through the sixth house and Ketu through his 12th house. This transit now of Rahu through his fifth house and Ketu through his 11th house is much less difficult. Whereas for Trump, it's especially this eclipse in his eighth house can be really devastating. And we're already seeing it devastating his finances, where he got an $80 million court verdict against him a few weeks ago. At any day, I guess his name is Engoron, is going to rule against the Trump, the Trump corporation that they owe. They think it's going to be like $370 million or something. They are probably going to revoke his license to do business in New York. Look, this could be devastating because he could appeal that, but he has to get some way to secure the bond and all. It's very complicated, and he could be wiped out financially very soon. And by the way, these cases are cut and dry. Those who might be out there saying, "Oh, it's a witch hunt. It's this. It's that." These are documents cases. The Trump business one is he filed fraudulent documents and did it for years and years. His CFO, Alan Weisselberg, just also confessed to perjury. There's a lot more they could even go after him for, but he overvalued the property grossly. He wouldn't even do it subtly. He overvalued the property relative to square feet and with price per square feet when he was trying to get loans, and then when he had to pay taxes on it, he devalued it. And he did it for a long time. And he defrauded others in the process of doing this. So these are standard crimes. If any of us did this, any business does this, they're liable. He shouldn't be above the law any more than you would be if you filed fraudulent tax returns. And again, he did it at a very large scale. So the problem is someone thinks they're above the law and whatever. So again, but aside from that, I'm just making that commentary because I know there's this rhetoric, but I'm also saying because these cases are cut and dried. There's nothing really to decide here. They're documents cases because when you sign the document, you're saying it's like you're signing it and saying, by signing this, I affirm that this is correct. Under the penalty of perjury, I'm signing this. So it's like you're saying it in court. So these things are catching up, and that's what eighth house is. Eighth house is consequences, heavy consequences. And heavy consequences are ahead for him for the next several months for sure. With him perhaps being on the ticket, potentially for him, these legal cases, these next few legal cases and financial cases, I mean, again, it's not like it prevents him from running, but there's very serious, if we look at polling, and there's a lot of Republican voters even have said that if he gets convicted of crimes, they want him taken off the ticket. I mean, these are things that are very, very hard to recover from. And again, we haven't seen these trials take place yet, but what's it going to be like in a month from now when we get into, mid-March and this trial is going on, and every day in the trial, the lawyers got up and talked about the affair with Stormy Daniels and the porn this and the this, and they met here, and the salaciousness and the proof of these payments. Again, what is that going to do to a campaign or whatever? So again, people often say, well, all this just makes him stronger. Well, it makes him stronger with, quote, his base, 20 to 25% of the country. Doesn't make him stronger with everybody. It makes him worse. with only those people who nothing that ever happens matters. So it makes him stronger with them, I guess. But even some of them have said that if he gets convicted of crimes, they wouldn't want to vote for him. They'd want him taken off the ticket, according to polling. So what's ahead for Trump definitely looks very heavy. Jupiter Ketu Dasha. Well, I have to talk about his Dasha as well. Jupiter is this retrograde planet. His Jupiter Dasha has not been... I mean, he was elected in Rahu Mars, and then when he went in Jupiter Dasha was his first term as president. But again, we see what's been happening, especially in Jupiter Mercury, and now in Jupiter Ketu, has been just really somewhat devastating. And Ketu has joined his debilitated moon in the 4th house. This, again, in the case study here that I did, this samselectionprediction.com, I talked about this in great detail. I also did some public case studies where I talked about how devastating Ketu is in general, because Ketu gives the results of the planets that it's joined, and here it's joined a debilitated moon, which is also the 12th house ruler. And by the way, this is in the 4th house. He could lose his home. All that stuff with Trump Tower and the business and stuff, he's going to have to start cashing in some assets. You know, homeboy's going to have to pay $300-400 million. He's going to, and this is liquid. This isn't, oh, I'll just get a loan, I'll leverage my assets. No, you don't leverage your assets for that. You liquidate your assets to pay this. You need to pay this as cash, money. You need to give this as money, not as, well, I have this golf course as equity. You're not applying for a loan. You have to pay this. So he's going to have to start liquidating some assets to do that. Maybe, you know, the plane and the golf course or something. By the way, the reason I say this is because the moon is debilitated in the 4th house. So in Jupiter Ketu, again, he could definitely lose some of these assets. It's certainly possible. Again, he goes into Jupiter Venus later. I'll do an update on this in a few months. You know, we'll see where this stuff is going. But I'm also doing this because we're right now at we're sort of teeter-tottering right now on the verge of this eclipse. Right? The eclipse is April 8th. You're saying, well, that's 2 months away. As I've been saying here, talking a lot about eclipses lately, the eclipse is like a waxing and waning effect. And the next month and a half, we're really waxing toward that April eclipse. And it's definitely relevant to do this update now between these two people, because we can see these two kind of marching on a parallel course, and their courses are really quite different at this point. Even though they look the same, you see one has a lot of devastating possibilities right now. By the way, even if something happens like in that Georgia case, even today there was a thing with Fani Willis or whatever, even if that blows up completely, there's still tons of peril ahead legally, and even just what we know is already there. Even just this trial in New York and this thing against his businesses, even what we know already is going to happen, and what just happened. You already see the devastation of the 8th house for him. And I say even with Biden, again, his 5th house, there's a lot of potential. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of potential good news and benefit and grace and re-looking at his situation happens in the next few months, because there's really been a lot of focus on his age and all of this stuff and his misspeaking and his age. And yeah, he looks old and a lot of focusing on that. But let's be real. I mean, Donald Trump is just as old, and Donald Trump is getting up saying that he's going to tell Russia to attack NATO allies. And I mean, how many other just terrible things this guy says every day, that he makes just as many gaffes calling Nikki Haley, Nancy Pelosi, and Obama. I mean, he's just as bad with what he says. But I think what could very well happen as we get closer to these eclipses is some of the things that Biden isn't getting credit for, like, for example, trying to pass like the immigration bill, and that the economy, that we didn't get this terrible recession that everybody predicted was going to happen. Everybody predicted everything was going to crash. It really hasn't. Things are really quite moderate and stable. Again, there are big problems like border and stuff like that are still really, incendiary. But again, he even tried to pass a border bill. It was rejected. I think for the next few months into spring, we could definitely see a turnaround, like particularly with poll numbers and things like that, which have not been favorable for Biden, so shockingly bad, and see some of those things really turn around as we get closer to that eclipse. That the eclipse in Biden's fifth house is perhaps more favorable, and for happening in Trump's eighth house is definitely not. So we'll leave it at that. And again, if you're interested in seeing my full prediction, you can go to samselectionprediction.com. And it's a prediction as if these two are the ones running. And if they are the ones running, you see I have a very detailed case study that explains a lot and shows you how I make those predictions. So thanks a lot. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel.